Hi, welcome to this segment of Behind the Glass. Today we're going to talk about media companies and social networks at scale. Now, at Social Flow, we work for more than half of the top 150 media companies in the world, including some of the biggest ones out there that publish tremendous quantities of content, have tremendous numbers of people across multiple titles using software. And we wanted to talk with you a little bit about our thinking and how we design enterprise software to try to meet the needs of big publishers. Now, you may not be quite that big as a publisher, and so some of these numbers I'm getting ready to illustrate for you, you sort of calibrate to your own size and scale. Even if you start taking zeros off, still many of the lessons will apply to you in terms of what you're trying to do. So let's dive right in here. So the first thing I'm going to show you here is we've got multiple social networks, and you know there are a lot of social networks to try to keep up with. Facebook probably first and foremost, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and there are many others we could list here, but let's just leave it at those four for right now for purposes of illustration. And then you've got editorial staff up here. And so edit staff may be the most overworked people in any kind of organization right now. Unfortunately, there's not enough edit staff and there's too much work for them to do. So it tends to be a fairly beleaguered group in terms of workload, doing their very best to try to get content out to the social networks where the consumers are, where the audience is. So again, you're putting the content out to the social networks on its way to consumers. That's really the whole point, is to try to drive traffic back to your website or get views and get engagement and interaction with your content, because that's where the audience is. And then last but not least, you've got ad staff down here, which tend not to be as large in numbers in terms of the executions, but end up being very critical. And there's a lot of important things we'll talk about here in a second in terms of how they're starting to interact with content going on social networks too, from a monetization standpoint. So let's just dive into some numbers and try to understand a little bit of what's going on here. So you imagine this editorial staff right here trying to publish significant quantities of content out to multiple social networks. And just to give you an idea of some of the scale that we fairly routinely see, so imagine you've got 100 or more edit staff publishing 10,000 or more posts every single month out to these social networks. And these numbers may seem high to you if you're with a smaller media company or publisher, but I'll tell you, we have clients that actually publish more like 100,000 stories a month and have more than 1,000. So this is by no means the high end of the scale in terms of the size and scope of media operations. But imagine now all these people, if you've got 100 people all publishing to multiple social networks many times a day. So you've got a high volume content creation and distribution operation. And again, Social Flow is really focused on that distribution. How do we effectively distribute content out to these social networks? So then, of course, as we talked about, I mean, you want the consumers to see that. So what are some of the numbers you might see for consumers? So let's just go with the number 10 million or more here. And again, your results may vary, but if you have the size of operation that has 100 people creating and publishing content and has more than 10,000 posts per month, you probably have many different titles, and you probably have actually well above 10 million fans or followers out there. But again, giving you the sense of the size and scale, they're interacting with content coming from all of these social networks, and it ends up being a very significant high volume content creation, even more than the 10,000 posts. If you think each of those 10,000 posts goes to a page that may have 1 million or more fans, you've got a significant distribution opportunity. The reach and the engagement numbers are going to be much larger even than that. And then last but not least, you've got your ad staff right over here, and that number may be, we'll call it 10. It tends to not be as many head count as the editorial staff, at least from the execution standpoint. There may be more sellers out there dealing with your advertisers, but they're getting content out to the social networks in a very different way. This tends to be the branded content studios, native content, or there are many customers working with Social Flow on a product that we call Attention Stream, which is taking your high-quality editorial content and monetizing it to your advertisers along with your native or your branded content offerings. A really smart and important way to leverage your content, but all of those people have their needs as well. End up being a very different set of needs, because now you're talking about paid distribution, and the APIs and the whole interfaces you're using are very different to buy a promoted post, say, on Facebook, or a promoted tweet on Twitter, compared to publishing something organically. So you get a sense when you start to populate all these lines and you start to look at these numbers, you get a sense, wow, this is pretty significant. And by the way, the dollars end up being very important right here. This is not people, but let's just imagine here that you're probably talking about more than $1 million in revenue. So it ends up being very important when we talk about the overworked staff up here. The more you can focus on generating revenue and helping the overall health of the organization, the better you're going to be able to staff your editorial organization as well. So to state the obvious, generating revenue obviously is a really important thing for media companies today in this day and age. So let's take all these numbers, which are a little bit hard to get your arms around, and just go over here. And so we say if we've got edit staff, ad staff, and consumers, I mean, that's what we talked about over there, and just put it in a tabular format. And then this is the people column, number of people. So more than 100, more than 10, and more than 10 million. And then you've got, say, 10,000 stories, 10,000 stories per month, and then you've got about $1 million happening right here. So you start to get a sense of doing an ROI type calculation or understanding how enterprise software can actually help you, or not just help you, ends up being a requirement. You can't manage the size and scale of an operation without enterprise software without a significant investment in either more people, or you just have a whole lot of things not being done that are probably very important to do. And so then just to wrap it all up here, I'm going to give you an acronym that we use to think about things in terms of what enterprise software should help you accomplish. And that acronym is Samoa, which happens to be a Polynesian country and a set of islands in the Pacific, but that's not the point. This is an acronym to give you an idea of what SocialFlow thinks about and how we develop our software and why we develop our software in terms of helping you as a media professional do your job better. So the S stands for security. We all know the challenges of securing any kind of enterprise system, securing your Facebook page. The last thing you want is to take your 100 people who are logging in and give them all access to your Facebook page. That becomes a nightmare of provisioning and deprovisioning. What happens when somebody leaves? What happens if they lose their iPhone and they didn't have it locked? Now all of a sudden somebody who found their iPhone could publish to your Facebook page. They could theoretically change your password and hijack your page. There's all kinds of security challenges. And by the way, if you're not using two-factor authentication, which means you get a text message to your phone when you log in from a different computer or a different place, you really should be. And your enterprise software should definitely support two-factor authentication. It's a much higher degree of security than not having that two-factor enabled, so we strongly encourage that. A stands for automation. So we talked about the overworked staff over here. You've got to find ways to automate tasks and have people be able to do more with the same amount of time, or in some cases more with even less time, as they have other priorities and other things to focus on as well. So automation is a critical element of any effective software package. Monetization, we talked a little bit about this ad staff over here, finding ways. You've got to find a way to integrate into your software and to your practices these new and different forms of monetization, whether it be branded content studios, native social, Attention Stream are offering. Those end up being very important to integrate into what you're doing because, again, the revenue is what foots the bill for the whole operation. Optimization is a bit of a technical term that we use in terms of taking your posts that are going out and finding the right window of attention for each of them. So imagine you publish 100 posts a day, or even more than that. Which post should go out when? And it's easy to think, okay, I've got breaking news, it should go out now. But probably 90% of your content is not breaking. It's timely, it's relevant, say today or tomorrow, but it's not necessarily necessary for it to go out right this instant. It could go out 15 minutes from now, it could go out 2 hours from now. And really the whole idea around optimization is to find the right window of attention so that content can land at a time and a place when it's most likely to receive consumer attention. So optimization ends up being very important to many, many of our customers. And then analyze, which is the last of the letters, but certainly not the last in terms of importance. Analyze, reporting and analytics in general are a critical element of almost every customer we deal with. Trying to understand the consumer engagement and behaviors, especially at the scale we're talking about here, getting reports, understanding reports for your advertisers, all of these types of things, understanding how organic, unpaid publishing interacts with the paid campaigns, all of those things end up being critically important, and being able to get those analytics and turn it into useful information for your business is incredibly important as well. So that's the Samoa acronym. We'd love to continue the conversation with you, and if you'd like to email us to do that, just give us an email at sales@socialflow.com. Thanks very much.